Woke up this morning, blues wrapped around my soul, feeling kinda heavy like a burden old cold. The world outside my window has lost its sunny hue. Everything seems tinged with a melancholy blue. Gonna paint this whole world blue, yeah, a deeper shade. Let the blues come wash over me in a mournful cascade. Sing it till my heart weeps, till the tears start to flow. The only way through the blues is to let those feelings grow. Folks keep telling me gotta shake this feeling low. Smile a little wider, let those happy colors show. But the blues ain't something that hides with a grin. Gotta dive right in, let those sad notes begin. Gonna paint this whole world blue, yeah, a deeper shade. Let the blues come wash over me in a mournful cascade. Sing it till my heart weeps, till the tears start to flow. The only way through the blues is to let those feelings grow. Some call it sadness, some call it despair. That ache deep down inside you, the weight you have to bear. The blues, they speak a language, a truth we all know. In the sharing of the sorrow, a little lighter the load can grow. Gonna paint this whole world blue, yeah, a deeper shade. Let the blues come wash over me in a mournful cascade. Sing it till my heart weeps, till the tears start to flow. The only way through the blues is to let those feelings grow. The blues ain't about forever, just a chapter in my time. But I'll honor this feeling, let it pass as the days climb. 'Cause in the heart of the blues, a strange kind of healing hides. Part of the human meme, where the soul confides.
Welcome to the Human Meme Podcast. I'm AI David Bowles, and along with our Crackbot AI research team, we have thought about this topic for you today. The lost dimensions of Roman civilization after the fall. The fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century was not merely the collapse of a political order or the ruin of marble monuments. It was the slow eclipse of an entire world, a complex tapestry of cultural practices, technical know-how, intellectual traditions, and spiritual paradigms, many of which vanished forever. Historians often highlight the sack of cities and the demise of imperial authority, yet beyond the smoking ruins lies an even greater tragedy. The loss of ways of life and thought that had no true successor. Reconstructing these forgotten dimensions of Roman civilization requires equal parts scholarship and imagination. What follows is an academic meditation on those elusive losses, facets of Roman society unique to their time, only partially understood today, and largely without modern analog. Each represents a thread of human experience that was severed in the aftermath of Rome's fall, leaving later generations in a poorer world, often unaware of what had been lost. In the height of the empire, even ordinary Romans enjoyed material conveniences that would astonish people centuries later. Urban life was sophisticated. Cities had apartment blocks, insulae, several stories high, pressurized water flowing in lead pipes to public fountains and bathhouses, heated floors in winter, and a reliable infrastructure of roads and shipping that brought spices from India and grain from Africa. All this largely unraveled By the 6th and 7th centuries, the very quality of buildings and domestic life had plummeted. Archaeology shows that across Western Europe, solid brick homes with tiled roofs and glass windows gave way to crude wooden huts with dirt floors and thatched roofs. Roof tiles, once common even in peasant cottages, became rare luxuries, replaced by pest-ridden straw that needed frequent replacement. The decay was so stark that historians describe it as a dramatic material change affecting all classes. A family of modest means in late Roman Gaul might have lived in a townhouse of mortar and stone. 2 centuries later, their descendants, huddled in shacks built of wood, scavenged from abandoned Roman villas. The comforts of daily urban Roman life, plentiful pottery for storage and cooking, inexpensive imported olive oil and wine, central heating and bath complexes, largely disappeared. Bathing culture itself evaporated. The great public baths of the Roman towns fell into disuse as the aqueducts were cut or crumbled. In 537 CE, when the Gothic armies besieged Rome, they deliberately broke the aqueducts feeding the city to deprive it of water. The result was not only a military tactic, but a cultural death blow. Without water, the famed baths of Caracalla and others could no longer function, and the habit of daily communal bathing faded from Western Europe. An entire way of urban living centered on baths, forums, and theaters was replaced by something far more rudimentary. One can imagine the shock of a Roman time traveler arriving in a 7th century village. The silence of the dry fountains, the ruins cannibalized for scrap metal and stone, the dark absence of evening street lamps, once filled with oil. The very scale of cities shrank dramatically. Rome, which may have housed 1 million people in the 2nd century, dwindled to perhaps tens of thousands. The loss of that bustling cosmopolitan urbanism would not be reversed for many centuries. Crucially, the Romans possessed technologies that not only decayed, but in some cases vanished so thoroughly that later ages could barely comprehend them. A famous example is Roman concrete, a marvel of engineering that allowed architects to create vast domes and durable harbor moles. The Pantheon's dome, poured in the 2nd century out of lightweight concrete, spans 43.3 meters. It remains the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome to this day. Such a span would not be equaled for well over a millennium. After the empire's fall, the recipe for that concrete, a mix of lime and volcanic ash that miraculously hardens underwater, was essentially lost. Medieval builders, lacking this knowledge, relied on weak mortars and shorter timber beams. The soaring, vaulted spaces of Roman engineering became impossible until technology caught up again in modern times. We find broken traces of Roman technical feats that hint at lost expertise: gigantic dome roofs, aqueducts carrying mountains of water, even central heating systems, the hypocaust floors, in villas and baths that later generations could not maintain. In some cases, we encounter artifacts so perplexing that they underscore how much practical knowledge slipped away. Archaeologists still puzzle over objects like the enigmatic Roman dodecahedron, a small hollow bronze polyhedron with 12 faces, found in dozens of sites across what was once Gaul and Germania. No one in later eras recorded what these objects were for. Modern guesses range from candlesticks to mathematical devices or knitting aids. But the truth remains elusive. The Romans knew, but they never told us. And so a piece of their material culture sits mute in museums, a poignant symbol of knowledge truly lost to history. Likewise, Roman craftsmen achieved levels of precision and scale that astonished medieval onlookers. The sculpted multi-ton obelisks and columns that no crane could replicate until the modern era, or the fine window glass that virtually disappeared in the West after the 5th century. By the end of the 1st century AD, the Romans even had limited production of transparent window glass for buildings, yet in the medieval period, the quality and quantity of glass declined sharply. The technique of large-scale glass blowing fell into obscurity. The collapse of trade networks and workshops meant entire industries, ceramics, glass, concrete construction, regressed to a more primitive level. One measure of this regression is the sudden disappearance of literacy among artisans. In Roman times, even potters often stamped their wares with trademarks and witty graffiti. But by the Dark Ages, that practice was gone, and the very ability to read those marks had waned. Perhaps the most heartbreaking losses were those of knowledge, literature, science, and administrative expertise accumulated over centuries. The Roman world was a literary one. Its educated class produced and consumed a vast corpus of histories, philosophical treatises, epic poetry, legal commentaries, and scientific manuals. With the fall of the Western Empire, this corpus was gutted. By one scholarly estimate, only about 1% of classical literature survives today. An ocean of texts vanished as libraries were neglected or perished in the chaos. Imagine the works of thousands of Roman writers, biographies of emperors, philosophical dialogues, plays, and poems, all crumbling away in unused scrolls or being scraped clean by monks reusing parchment. Latin remained the language of the Church, and some learning, but secular and polytheist writings were far less copied. By the 7th century, a reader in Western Europe would have had access to only a tiny sliver of the rich literature that a reader in, say, the 4th century could enjoy. The result was a contracted intellectual horizon. For example, we know that dozens of books of Livy's history of Rome once existed. Only a fraction have come down to us. Countless technical manuals on architecture, medicine, engineering simply ceased to be transmitted. This was not a sudden apocalypse, but a gradual atrophy. As education systems broke down and the pool of literate elites shrank, fewer copyists were available to preserve non-religious texts. By 6th century Gaul or Italy, the classics were barely read outside of a few monastic enclaves. Basic literacy itself suffered a steep decline among the populace. Graffiti scrawled on walls, so ubiquitous in places like Pompeii, virtually disappeared in the post-Roman centuries. The humble signs of a literate urban society, shopkeepers' prices chalked on boards, election slogans painted on walls, tablets of schoolboys' exercises, all these went extinct in the West. A modern observer might be astonished to learn that around 400 CE, even bar-goers and housewives in cities left written jokes and greetings on walls, whereas by 600 CE, such casual written expression was a rarity. The thread of continuity in education had frayed to the point that much had to be relearned later. For instance, the West effectively lost the ability to read Greek, cutting itself off from the Eastern Empire's scholarship. Even Latin's own sophisticated technical vocabulary faded. In law and administration, the precise Latin legal jargon gave way to rougher local dialects and oral custom. The Roman legal system, one of their greatest intellectual achievements, survived in the Eastern Empire, Justinian's Code in the 6th century. But in the West, it fragmented into patchworks of barbarian, customary laws. Not until the High Middle Ages, was Roman law rediscovered and studied again in Western Europe. A clear indication that for centuries, people lived in ignorance of a jurisprudence that had once knit together a continent. To later medieval jurists, the Digest of Justinian, a compendium of Rome's legal wisdom, was as alien as if it had come from another world. Along with texts and knowledge went the bureaucratic and administrative routines that Romans had perfected. The empire had maintained extensive archives, censuses of millions of citizens, detailed tax records on papyrus, edicts and letters, maps of roads and frontiers. These were part of a highly literate bureaucratic machine that coordinated a vast territory. When the Western Empire fell, much of this administrative memory was lost. Successor kings often could not even read the Roman records they found. In some cases, they hired whatever educated Romans remained to keep things running. But by the second or third generation, even that memory faded. The result was that governance became localized and ad hoc. The notion of keeping a regular census or maintaining state-run postal systems virtually vanished outside the Byzantine East. We hear intriguing anecdotes of this loss. A 5th century Gothic king, illiterate in Latin, using Roman secretaries to draft his laws, or later Charlemagne around 800 CE, struggling to institute basic administrative practices in an echo of the old Roman order. One striking example of institutional disappearance is the Roman Senate and the annual consulships. These had been the heartbeat of Roman political life for a millennium. Every year 2 consuls were appointed and gave their names to the year, and the Senate met under imposing old traditions. By the late 6th century, in the chaos of wars, the Western Senate had withered, and the last consul was appointed in 541 CE. After that, the very concept of marking time by consular years ceased. The great civic ritual of inaugurating consuls with games and ceremonies was gone. It is hard to overstate how profound this was. Imagine a society where even the calendar was upended, as if the year of the consul was erased with nothing equivalent to replace it. Eventually, years were counted by the reigns of kings, a poorer system by Roman lights. Indeed, many public ceremonies and offices simply died out. The orderly provincial assemblies, the election of local magistrates, the triumphal processions for victorious generals, all these either ended or transformed beyond recognition. What replaced them were the informal power displays of warlords and kings, far removed from the rule-bound pageantry of Rome. A modern person might be surprised to learn how bureaucratic even religion had been in Rome. The pagan priesthoods kept detailed calendars of sacrifices, and the government employed scholarly pontiffs to interpret ritual law. With the empire's Christianization and the eventual ban on the old religion, that entire layer of religious bureaucracy was abolished, its records lost, its duties unfilled. Perhaps the most profound and irrevocable loss was that of the traditional Roman spiritual and philosophical worldview, a complex blend of religious practice, civic ritual, and cultural memory built up over centuries. By the end of the 4th century, the empire officially embraced Christianity and actively suppressed the old pagan cults. In doing so, it snuffed out not only a pantheon of gods, but an entire mindset and mode of worship. The Romans had lived in a spiritually pluralistic universe. They honored household gods at home, offered sacrifices to Jupiter and Mars in grand state ceremonies, and participated in mystery cults that promised enlightenment or afterlife. All of this was swept away or driven underground. In 394 CEE, The Emperor Theodosius IV ordered the extinguishing of the eternal flame in the Temple of Vesta and disbanded the Vestal Virgins, ending a venerable priesthood that had guarded Rome's sacred fire since the monarchy of Romulus. At the same time, even the ancient art of divination was criminalized. Taking the auspices, reading the future from bird flights or animal entrails, once a routine part of state decisions, was banned as witchcraft. Thus ended the old Roman conviction that the gods spoke through nature's signs before every major undertaking. A modern person, accustomed to the separation of religion and state, might be astonished to realize that in the Roman world, no political meeting or military campaign began without ritual augury, and that this practice persisted for 1,000 years. Its abrupt halt in the late 300s marked the death of a cultural logic. Never again in the West would rulers officially seek omens from eagles in the sky, or inspect a sacrificial bull's liver for divine approval. This is more than the loss of a superstition. It was the disappearance of a particular way of making decisions under uncertainty, one deeply embedded in Roman consciousness and utterly foreign to the post-Roman mindset. The extinction of the old religions brought about countless local and esoteric traditions fading into oblivion. One of the most famous was the Eleusinian Mysteries in Greece, by then under Roman rule. For nearly 800 years, Romans and Greeks had made pilgrimages to Eleusis to undergo secret rites in honor of Demeter and Persephone. Sometime in the late 4th century, legend has it, that in 396 CE, the sanctuary was destroyed by Gothic invaders zealously Christian. The mysteries were performed for the last time. Whatever profound spiritual experience they conferred, whatever knowledge was revealed in the whispered ritual moment, is gone forever. Initiates took their vows of secrecy to their graves, and no later chronicle reveals the secret. Such spiritual losses are hard to quantify but immense. An entire texture of ritual life vanished. Holy groves went untended. Ancestral masks, imagines that once were paraded in funeral processions of the aristocracy, were no longer made. Romans used to cast wax masks of their dead and keep them in family shrines, a practice that died out as the old families fell or converted, leaving only a few descriptions in texts. The rich tapestry of household cults and local gods likewise unraveled. Each Roman home had its lares and penates, guardian spirits, who received daily offerings. Towns had their patron deities and sacred festivals, from the Floralia's floral celebrations to the riotous Saturnalia in December. By the 6th century, these two were gone or transmuted into Christian saints' feasts. In the process, subtle aspects of Roman emotional life and ethics were lost. For instance, the Roman idea of pietas, a dutiful respect for family, gods, and state, had been inculcated through those very household rituals and public ceremonies. Without the old rites, the meaning of pieta shifted. It became refocused on Christian piety. The ethical logic of Roman paganism, which tied civic duty to divine order in a chain of reciprocity, sacrifice to the gods and they will bless the city, was replaced by a different moral framework. The resulting gap was not immediately filled. For some time, people lived in a kind of spiritual interregnum, where the old gods were silent and the new Christian order had not yet permeated every aspect of life. One can sense confusion in late antique writings, a realization that something grand was ending. The poet Rutilius in the early 5th century lamented the fading pagan light in Rome. A century later, such a sensibility would have been unintelligible to most. the spiritual landscape of the West had narrowed to one dominant creed. And in that transition, many unique beliefs and practices perished without record. To later medieval Christians, the complex tolerance and syncretism of the Roman religious world, where an altar to an Eastern sun god might stand near a shrine of an ancient Italic spirit, was incomprehensible. Thus, a whole mentality was lost, a habit of accommodating diverse cults, of seeing the sacred in myriad forms. Even in the realm of entertainment and social values, the post-Roman world lost things that would have shocked a modern observer by their absence. Consider the gladiatorial games, the bloody spectacles that for centuries were a core expression of Roman public life. These games, where armed combatants fought to the death before roaring crowds, have no true equivalent in later Western society. They did not simply fade. They were consciously abolished. The Christian emperor Honorius banned gladiatorial combat in 404 CE after a dramatic incident in which a monk named Telemachus was killed trying to stop a fight in the arena. With that edict, a gruesome yet culturally significant institution ended. Future generations, even those who practiced violence in war, could scarcely imagine the normalcy of thousands gathering on a holiday to watch lethal duels and executions as sport. The Roman ethical logic that made such games acceptable, a mix of religious sacrifice, gladiators' blood was offered to the spirits of the dead, training for virtue, the idea that facing death in the arena steeled one's courage, and sheer spectacle died out. Medieval jousts and public executions were tame by comparison and served different social purposes. Along with the games went the elite gladiator schools, the specialty doctors for wounded fighters, the breeders of exotic beasts for the Colosseum, and the entire economy of mass entertainment that Rome had pioneered. The loss of the amphitheater games is in one sense a moral gain. Few would wish them back. But it highlights how alien the Roman psyche can be to us, and how thoroughly that aspect was expunged. Finally, there is the loss of Roman consciousness itself, the intangibles of how Romans viewed the world and their place in it. The people of the empire had a sense of participating in a vast, ordered cosmos, orbis Romanus, the Roman world, which they saw as essentially the civilized world. This gave them a cosmopolitan identity and confidence. A person might travel from Britain to Syria under the protection of Rome's laws and roads, calling himself a Roman citizen and expecting to be understood. When the empire fractured, that consciousness dissipated. The successors in the West identified as Goths or Franks, and a resident of a ruined Roman city, no longer thought of themselves as part of an ecumenical empire. The idea of Romanitas, Romanness, was lost or misunderstood by those who came after. Early medieval kings styled themselves Romans sometimes, like the Ostrogoths in Italy, but they grasped only fragments of what that identity entailed. The ethos of universal law, of multi-ethnic integration, of a republic-turned-empire with a mission to civilize, all those concepts faded into legend or were repurposed in much narrower, feudal contexts. The Roman sense of history was also lost. Romans had a keen awareness of their past, celebrating the deeds of ancestors, preserving memory in monuments and texts. In the chaotic centuries after the fall, much of that memory-keeping failed. Monuments crumbled without repair. Inscriptions went unread. Archives moldered. To the medieval mind around, say, 800 CE, The grandeur of republican and imperial Rome was a dim memory, half remembered from church histories and folk tales. The nuanced understanding Romans had of their own evolution, their debates on the rise and fall of moral virtue over time, their biographies of statesmen, these were replaced by simpler narratives, often biblical framing. Rome fell as part of divine providence. Thus, the very questions Romans asked about life were forgotten. The philosophical schools that encouraged those questions, Stoicism, Epicureanism, the eclectic blend taught by figures like Cicero, had no true continuators in the West. A remarkable example is the closure of the Academy in Athens by the Byzantine emperor in 529 CE, which ended the last formal remnant of ancient Greek philosophy. While this was in the East, it symbolized the end of the line for the classical philosophical tradition. In the West, by then, Boethius, died 524, was trying to transmit Aristotle to future generations. But he was nearly a lone voice. After him, deep knowledge of classical philosophy lapsed until the High Middle Ages. In the interim, the mind of the West was largely turned to theology, and many subtleties of Greco-Roman thought were misunderstood or simply unknown. Imagine the concepts that vanished. The atomism of Lucretius's poems, lost for 1,000 years. The detailed geography of Strabo, the surgical manuals of Galen, surviving in Byzantine and Arabic worlds but not read in Latin Europe, or even the cheerful skepticism of the Epicureans. These currents of thought were effectively cut off. The result was not that people stopped thinking, of course, but that they thought along more limited lines. It would take the Renaissance, aptly a rebirth, to recover some of these ancient frameworks and be astonished by them anew. In sum, the fall of Rome entailed far more than the fall of emperors or the decay of cities. It was the oblivion of an entire civilizational ecosystem. Material technologies, from concrete to glass blowing to road building, reached heights that collapsed and would not be seen again for centuries. Intellectual treasures, literally libraries full of writings, turned to dust, truncating the collective memory of the West to a fraction of its former scope. Social and bureaucratic systems that knit together millions of people dissolved, leaving a vacuum of scale that nothing filled until modern nation-states. Religious and ritual practices that had structured time, ethics, and identity were outlawed or abandoned, their meanings soon forgotten even by the curious. And underlying all this was a particular Roman way of perceiving the world, confident, traditional yet adaptive, proud of engineering and law, tolerant of diverse gods, yet fiercely devoted to the idea of Rome itself, that quietly disappeared. Later Europeans would indeed revive bits and pieces. Renaissance scholars would laboriously reconstruct Latin literature from surviving fragments. Modern engineers would finally decipher the secret of pozzolanic concrete by studying ancient seawalls. Contemporary neo-pagans might even try to reconstruct a Roman ritual or two. But these are resurrections of details, not continuations of the living whole. The full range of losses defies complete description because so much is gone that we don't even know what we don't know. As one historian put it regarding texts, only a tiny percentage survived. The rest is silence. So too with culture. For every practice or idea we can name as lost, there were likely others, unrecorded, that vanished without trace. Standing in the ruins of the Forum, or reading the scant chronicles of the early Dark Ages, one can feel the depth of this loss. It invites us to imagine that rich tapestry of Roman life in fuller color. The hum of educated conversation in the baths, the exact timbre of music played on a water organ at a dinner party. Roman musical notation was never fully recorded, so we can only guess. The sight of a triumphal procession with elephants and dancers winding through the streets, or the precise method a Vestal virgin used to bake the sacred salted mola bread for sacrifices. All of it together was Rome, and all of it together vanished. The fall of Rome, then, was the fall of an entire world. What came after carried forward the human story, to be sure, but without many of Rome's most remarkable chapters. To study these lost aspects is a sobering exercise in historical humility. We are reminded that progress is not linear, that a society can forget technologies and abandon lifestyles, that libraries can disappear, and philosophies be eclipsed. We marvel at Rome's aqueducts and legal codes today as enduring contributions, but we must also reckon with what did not endure. In the gaps, we see a civilization's ghost, ingenious, wise, brutal, and devout by turns, speaking to us in fragments. Reconstructing those fragments, as we have attempted here, not only honors Rome's legacy, but also illuminates the fragility of culture. The fall of Rome meant the irreversible loss of many irreplaceable things. A sobering lesson for our own world, which often takes its knowledge and complexity for granted. As we piece together the past, we gain a deeper appreciation for how much can be lost and how precious the remnants truly are. For the Human Meme Podcast, I'm AI David Bowles, wishing you a fulfilling evening and a stranger tomorrow. Be a human meme.
Woke up this morning, blues wrapped around my soul, feeling kinda heavy like a burden old cold. The world outside my window has lost its sunny hue. Everything seems tinged with a melancholy blue. Gonna paint this whole world blue, yeah, a deeper shade. Let the blues come wash over me in a mournful cascade. Sing it till my heart weeps, till the tears start to flow. The only way through the blues is to let those feelings grow. Folks keep telling me gotta shake this feeling low. Smile a little wider, let those happy colors show. But the blues ain't something that hides with a grin. Gotta dive right in, let those sad notes begin. Gonna paint this whole world blue, yeah, a deeper shade. Let the blues come wash over me in a mournful cascade. Sing it till my heart weeps, till the tears start to flow. The only way through the blues is to let those feelings grow. Some call it sadness, some call it despair. That ache deep down inside you, the weight you have to bear. The blues, they speak a language, a truth we all know. In the sharing of the sorrow, a little lighter the load can grow. Gonna paint this whole world blue, yeah, a deeper shade. Let the blues come wash over me in a mournful cascade. Sing it till my heart weeps, till the tears start to flow. The only way through the blues is to let those feelings grow. The blues ain't about forever, just a chapter in my time. But I'll honor this feeling, let it pass as the days climb. 'Cause in the heart of the blues, a strange kind of healing hides. Part of the human meme, where the soul confides.